Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walker. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 28th, 2017. To this morning's disruption was I forgot to bring the microphone close to me. How about that? That's actually an essential part of not only a complete breakfast, but a great way to get a radio show started. In the morning, we are, we're a little bit behind, just a few seconds behind in getting things up and running. The holiday schedule, of course, has everything scattered to the four winds. And the four winds are really kicking up a little bit here today, too. We're in the single digits in wind chill in the morning in Virginia. I can only imagine what it's like in the rest of the country. I don't have to imagine for long, however, as we will be visited by a ghost of the north. I guess everyone has frozen to death, so you're all ghosts. Greg Dworkin will drop by from Connecticut, where I assume it's about 5,000 degrees below zero. Boston, I understand, under one of the longest lasting and deepest cold snaps in quite some time, perhaps as much as a century. How can there be global warming, everyone? I can already hear the complaints, right? Okay, right, yes, we understand by now, I think. You and I, anyway, that, yes, it's climate change, not global warming, but yes, in fact, on average, whatever, we don't need to explain the math to people. Many things to catch up on today, lots of stories flying by. I haven't had as much opportunity to review the atrocities in Twitter yet this morning, but plenty of things. Doesn't matter. There was plenty last night, and we can stack them up and read through them. I guess the thing tops on my list left over from yesterday. Very interesting story that perhaps we will dive into a little bit later. A trending story in Pocket, if you take their metrics to mean anything, is one I saw commented on this morning almost right away on Twitter, and lots yesterday. Yair Rosenberg's piece, Confessions of a Digital Nazi Hunter. Who knew that there were going to be digital Nazi hunters in the future? I think we all should have known. But back in the cough ward already. We started the show. I didn't realize that he was awake yet, but now I know. Anyway, Yair has put together an interesting story. Basically, long story short, and I shouldn't give short shrift to the story because it's an interesting and important one, is having noticed during the past election just how many pro-Trump neo-Nazi trolls and bots were in circulation, and a particular sub-genre, I guess, of trolls and bots. That is, people who put together online or Twitter personas that they had stolen from elsewhere. In other words, the methodology is explained in the article. You steal a picture of a Hasidic Jewish person, or perhaps a Muslim in hijab, and assume a name that is stereotypically either Jewish or Muslim or whoever you're targeting, and pretend to be a member of those communities, and then say outrageous things and anger people at the community for your outrageousness when, in fact, you are a neo-Nazi, not a Hasidic Jewish person. Anyway, there are, of course, many other sorts of trolls, and we actually have another story about a new sort of online troll that's emerging that we might share. But Rosenberg actually did something about it. He reached out to some programmers and said, can we put together some sort of a bot that would be good at detecting these sorts of Twitter accounts as they pop up and as we hear from them, and identifying them and tweeting out publicly that they are, in fact, fake accounts and bots and that you shouldn't be listening to them. And it was apparently relatively easy to put such a thing together, and they went and did it. And they were pretty successful in doing so. And Twitter, faced with the choice, I guess, of either doing or not doing something about the vast numbers of neo-Nazis impersonating Jews and defaming them on their platform, flipped a coin, and it came up on the side of the coin. Heads will delete the Nazis. Tails will not delete the Nazis. If it lands on its side, we'll delete the Nazi hunting bot. And that's what they did. So there you go. That's how you solve a problem in modern society. We have to hear from both sides, except not actually your side. We have to protect the Nazis. They are, after all, our power users. They account for a huge amount of our traffic. And, of course, the only thing that's important to shareholders, i.e. people who will either give us lots of money or fool other people who want to give us lots of money into believing that it's worth giving us lots of money, that's our most important demographic. Because otherwise, we won't become billionaires from the stupid chat program we put together. And you can't have that. So that's essentially what happened here. He gives a much more elaborate narrative, and one which we might perhaps revisit, unless Greg would like to sit here and discuss it. But an important story, and a reminder, of course, that venture capitalist and startup tech bro types aren't necessarily anyone's friend in all this. They really still have not figured out what to do with online harassment. And of course, this isn't the first demographic to be targeted for online harassment. That, of course, that honor, as usual, falls to communities of color who are harassed wherever they go, even online. And they never figured out what to do about that. They never figured out what to do about harassment of women online. And I guess then, no surprise, it's not that Yair is claiming any special status. He's simply saying, this happened too. And if you have to wait in line to decide who gets attention first, well, so be it, I guess. It's like, we're familiar with it. It's like going to the deli and taking a number. I know we have to wait our turn. Let's see. Greg Dworkin, I'm amazed you were able to make computers work in sub-zero temperatures. How are you doing in there in Connecticut?
It's cold here. It was 3 degrees when I woke up.
That was our wind chill. But you had actual...
It's warmed up, though. It's now 5.
All right. Well, solar power. That's doing it for you.
Well, solar plowing, we still have ice kind of everywhere. And it's a bright day. The sun is out. It's freezing. But, we'll see if we can get through the day and get through the winter. And that's how things work. You started off the show with some really fascinating stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about it.
All right. Let's do that.
Back in the day, when the election was going on and you felt like you were getting into a conversation with somebody who seemed like a troll.
Yes.
Maybe even a Nazi or a Nazi troll. Sometimes you would spec it out by following their timeline, see who they retweeted.
Right.
That's how people catch Donald Trump Jr. doing stuff. Sometimes you just look at their names, and you kind of get a clue. Mm-hmm. You could find somebody faking that they were Jewish, and, to exaggerate, they would call themselves, Shlomo.
Right.
But, instead of saying Shlomo ben Shlomo, which would be vaguely Semitic, they would call themselves Shlomo's son. And you
yes,
hey, that's more Nordic than it is, Semitic. What is going on here? And so you
Viking
could,
Jew.
pick out the trolls one by one. And then people started, as you talked about with Yair Rosenberg, putting together bots to do this. And I guess Twitter eventually kicked them off for doing that.
Yes, they did.
Or kicked off the bot.
Right.
But there are still websites and programs that you can go to, simple websites, where you plug in the Twitter name and it'll give you a rating, 85% fake, 97% fake, 75, so you get an idea of whether or not you're actually talking to somebody who's real or a troll. So they can't ban that. And so if you want to do it manually, there's still ways of trying to spec out whether somebody's a troll or not.
That is good.
And that's kind of a big deal. And interestingly, one of the pieces that I had put aside was this Max Boot piece.
Yes.
Foreign Policy called 2017 was the year I learned about my white privilege.
Yeah,
I
did
used to
see
be a
that.
smart alecky conservative who scoffed at political correctness. The Trump era has opened my eyes. And, of course, part of that is this whole Nazi thing.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I saw about 3 stories this morning, and well, that's 2 of them. So I'm fresh out of stories now. That's good. Because
Well,
we're seeing the same things.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's bad. I don't know.
It is a fascinating, and we'll get to the third story too, which is the Roy Moore problem. But it's just fascinating that, as your Rosenberg put it, somehow Nazis are acceptable on Twitter.
Yes.
And the rest of us aren't.
I do see that all day long, people tweeting out, the harassment that they've gotten from Nazis and the responses that they get from Twitter. You can send Twitter, here's 6 people who tweeted me, I can't wait to put you in the gas chamber and kill your whole family. And Twitter says that's not a violation of our policy. But
right.
if you catalog them,
remind you
it
of some of the older stuff. Remember, people would all of a sudden find their name within 3 sets of parentheses.
Yes, that's true.
And the Nazi trolls originally started to do that to identify who they thought was Jewish.
Yes. And I can kind of understand where Twitter was puzzled by that and not sure what to do with it. Well, it's not an overt threat, but then it moved into overt threats. And they don't have a gas chamber, do they? So, I guess it's not really that overt.
Let's just touch base a little bit about the Max Boot piece. I saw America as a land of opportunity, not a bastion of racism or sexism.
Well, duh.
He himself was a Jewish refugee from the Soviet Union. He didn't even think he was a white person, a catch-all category that's been extended to include everybody from a Mayflower descendant to a recently arrived illegal immigrant from Ireland. Don't forget, he's a conservative here.
Yes.
I was a newcomer to America who was eager to assimilate. I saw its merits without blinding myself to its dark side. Well, live and learn. A quarter century is enough time to examine deeply held shibboleths and to see if they comport with reality. In my case, I have concluded that my beliefs are based more on faith than on a critical examination of the evidence. In the last few years in particular, it's become impossible for me to deny the reality of discrimination, harassment, and even violence that people of color and women continue to experience in modern-day America from a power structure that remains for the most part in the hands of straight white males. People like me, in other words.
Right. Well, that's
Whether
true.
I realize it or not, I've benefited from my skin color and gender, and those of a different gender or sexuality or skin color have suffered because of it. It sounds obvious, but it wasn't clear to me until recently. I have had my consciousness raised seriously.
Yeah, not even kidding. Okay.
It's just a very interesting piece.
It is.
And he concludes with the larger problem of racism in our society was made evident in Donald Trump's election, despite or because of his willingness to dog whistle toward white nationalists with his pervasive bashing of Mexicans, Muslims, and other minorities. Trump even tried to delegitimize the first African-American president by claiming he wasn't born in this country. Now he goes after African-American football players who kneel during the playing of the anthem to protest police brutality. Far from being concerned about police misconduct, which disproportionately targets people of color, Trump actively encourages it. So it's really quite a good article, and let's just put this in context. We talked about Paul Nehlen yesterday, the Nazi who's trying to challenge Speaker of the House Ryan next time around. And he already ran against Ryan once and lost by a fairly huge amount. And the interesting news about him today, as compared to yesterday, is this piece is from The Guardian. Steve Bannon cuts ties with far-right candidate trying to unseat Paul Ryan. Paul Nehlen appearance on far-right podcast was decisive. He detracted criticism for a series of controversial tweets. I have some block quotes that I threw in the list I sent you. Nehlen's a businessman and so-called mini-Trump who was backed by leading right-wing figures, including Sarah Palin and Ann Coulter, in the 2016 primary for Ryan's Wisconsin congressional seat. So if you want to know who's backing Nazis, the names are right there. Let's name names. The speaker's eventual margin of victory was huge, 84-16, despite aggressive pro-Nehlen coverage from Breitbart. Trump has praised Nehlen, I guess is his name, Nehlen, in August 2016 after the billionaire was condemned for criticizing the family of a Muslim American soldier killed in battle. Nehlen praised Trump. Then Republican nominee returned the favor in a tweet. Thanks to Paul Nehlen for your kind words. Very much appreciated, Trump wrote, at a time when Nehlen was still fighting to unseat Ryan. So you can't go around and say, well, Trump doesn't even know who he is. He knows exactly who he is.
Yes, or
And
doesn't.
so, you have that. But I mean, you got to think about it. When the Nazis are cutting loose the Nazi, what does that say?
I prefer a different Nazi.
Yeah, I suppose. This is from the Daily Beast, same story. Even Steve Bannon is finally renouncing the unhinged racist running against Paul Ryan. An appalling candidate gives the party a chance to draw a needed line in the sand. This one is from Evan Siegfried, my conservative Republican friend, who is trying to save his party, along with a handful of other people.
Forget it.
And he points out, Evan Siegfried does, he has his own Siegfried line, of course, that this is just totally unacceptable to the party. And what GOP voters need to do is throw him out entirely. And Siegfried points out, and now Nalin's desperation has shifted from quiet to all-out anti-Semitism. He took to Twitter after Christmas to attack Jewish conservative Ariel Davidson, her sin. She noted that Nalin tweeting anti-Semitic means was wrong. Nalin's response, he told her to police your own people first, with pictures of tweets from other Jewish conservatives. So there's a list of like people you can't stand who have turned on Nalin.
Okay.
Including Kurt Schlichter and John Cardillo, while GOP primary voters in Wisconsin will ultimately render final judgment on Nalin and likely do so by handing him yet another embarrassing loss. Republicans and conservatives of all stripes should join together to say there's no place for his tirades and un-American statements in our party. So that would be great if the GOP would kick out the Nazis. You could start with Bannon and the guy in the White House, but, that's fine. Just do it.
Yeah, sure. Start somewhere, I guess. Sure, whatever. They have a pretty huge problem.
They do, because, my point is not look at the GOP. Some guy says that they're getting tough on them. That's not the point. The point is that you got a Nazi who is formally, not formerly, but formally running as a Republican.
Yes.
And, it's like David Duke running as a Republican. You can't run away from that.
Yes.
He is who you are.
Now, all the stories are about...
Well, he lost the election. Well,
yeah.
How is he even running?
Right. And we have lots of stories about fine, upstanding Republicans, and it's good that they're trying to kick him out. Fine, upstanding Republicans trying to distance themselves from / purge him from the party. We had like 2 weeks of Hillary Clinton and the Democrats have a Harvey Weinstein problem. And we got about 10 minutes of stories here all about how the fine fellows over in the Republican Party are doing their damnedest to get rid of this troublesome Nazi. But this story goes back to, David Duke in the 90s running for Senate and governor of Louisiana. And you know what? He's still around, by the way. And Donald Trump's still accepting
still a big
his endorsement.
supporter.
Yeah. So doing a great
it's
job.
Not just him, of course. It's Roy Moore too. And today's story
from Siegfried
is
to Roy.
in the
Excellent.
news about
Yes.
Roy Moore, because today at 2:00 he's supposed to be officially declared the loser because Doug Jones will be certified as the winner.
I see. Well, he is a loser.
And Roy Moore is challenging that.
All right. Have fun.
He has this idea, which is really
That's where the courthouse is.
Yeah, more than amusing. It's horrible. But he has this idea that he's going to sue John Merrill, the Republican Secretary of State, and the whole apparatus in Alabama. And the basis for his lawsuit is voter fraud.
I see.
And as our friend Taniel points out, it's even more than that. It's that, why do you think there's voter fraud? Because a lot of black people voted.
Well,
and what is his evidence that black people voted? Well, if you look at past elections, they didn't vote as much as they did this time.
I see. The evidence is he lost.
Right. So, but so you break through this and try to go through it. Taniel does a lovely job here.
All right.
He writes, notes logic's perversity. They call higher turnout historically unusual and anomalous. And from there, they jump to causing it unexplained and implausible. But effectively, they're using past patterns of suppression as evidence for impropriety today.
Yes. Good point. Yeah, the reason
we didn't let you vote before, and this time you somehow got around that. There must be fraud.
Something must be going wrong here. Normally, we catch.
Normally, we wouldn't allow you to do that.
Right. Pretty good. That will register outside of Alabama.
Right. So Mike McDonald takes a slightly different tack in pointing out the bizarreness of this. Now, he's a political scientist, not a lawyer. Like myself, he's not a lawyer, so we don't understand all this legal stuff. But he got a hold of the actual lawsuit here.
Oh, throw it out.
Okay?
Yes.
And part of the complaint here is number 11, fictitious defendants. Fictitious defendants 1 through 66 are any of the probate court judges the discovery of evidence indicates fail to abide by federal law and or state law with regards to any of their duties in an election. Presumably they let black vote, so he's suing them. And then number 12 is fictitious defendants 67 through 69 are those companies which were contracted with the state and failed to comply either negligently and or via conspiracy with federal law and or state law. And presumably those are the voting machine tabulations which were fixed so that he lost. But the whole idea of having fictitious defendant, Michael McDonald not being a lawyer, says, I imagine fictitious defendants is legalese in Moore's lawsuit, but it perfectly sums up the nature of the allegations.
Yeah, I am not even certain. I mean, fictitious? Oh, all right.
That's what it say. That's what it say right here. So I will give this to you. I don't know what that means, but, not being a lawyer, I'm just looking at it and laughing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand what they're talking about, but I don't know. Maybe it's done differently in different places. I've never seen.
Yeah, well, don't forget, Roy Moore couldn't exactly afford the best talent.
Right, that's true. Although he was once Supreme Court justice there.
Like I said,
twice,
when you were looking at some of the lawyers who were defending him during his election campaign.
Yes, many of whom were not licensed in Alabama.
Yeah,
which is not a tough bar.
To add to the pylon, the allegation involves 10 to 15 sample ballots, not real ballots. Anybody could have marked the ballots, and even Merrill didn't think this was vote fraud. So it's pretty bizarre stuff, but it just highlights the whole thing that was going on there in Alabama, which in and of itself, even without this, is an interesting story. But there's one piece of this lawsuit that I think bears mentioning, and that is, does Speaker McConnell, Leader McConnell,
yes, okay,
use this lawsuit as an excuse to not sit Doug Jones?
No.
Do you say that, well, until this is settled, and then you just take more time to not sit a Democratic Senate, and so McConnell has, one less Democratic vote to worry about? Why would this come up? Because Mitch McConnell has been doing stuff like this for the past 8 years. That's
true. And I guess, I wouldn't want to suggest it to him. And it would be a real surprise, though, to me if he did.
It would be. But, if somebody had said that to me a year ago, 2 years ago, I'd say, come on. But now you got to think about it before you say it's probably not going to happen. And you have to take the suggestion seriously. That's true.
I ultimately still say no, just because he didn't actually seem to really want Roy Moore to win, and you're really going to get yourself in trouble if you hold things up, don't seat Doug Jones, and wait for the outcome of the lawsuit. One, because who knows what the hell they're going to come up with.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give you a flavor of just how bizarre this whole thing is.
Yeah, I hope not. Although if he does that, then you know that he's just mentally ill and needs to be removed.
Yeah, but, also just how little the sides trust each other that would even make it into the idea of a suggestion. But let's talk about the real story.
Go ahead and do it.
Of Doug Jones' win in Alabama. This is a fantastic piece from Ezra Klein, who interviewed Joe Trippi.
First, a brief explainer. Who is Ezra Klein?
Ezra Klein is the publisher, used to be the executive editor of Vox, and he writes Vox Splainers.
I see.
And one of the Vox Splainers, I guess, that you're asking for, David, is a Vox Splainer on who is Ezra Klein.
Yes.
And so he actually is interesting here in terms of Trippi's comments about the election, and it might be a little different than what we all have been talking about up until now.
Alabama? Okay.
Yeah. The day before the Washington Post story came out, we were behind by 1 point, 46 to 45, says Joe Trippi.
All right.
And the day before the election, we were ahead by 2
I'm sorry.
in our own survey. We ended
Okay.
winning by 1.8.
Yes. All right. Okay.
Right?
Yes. got
Trippy
it.
says this is the reality of the Alabama Senate election, and the Washington Post story and all the pedophile stuff really had nothing to do with his winning or losing.
Oh.
Trippy says it was a dead heat before the story. It was a dead heat the day it ended. And a lot of what the media think they know about what happened is wrong. That's why I found this fascinating.
I get it. I get it.
Okay,
sort of.
so listen to the logic.
Sort of. Yes.
Trippy, who managed Howard Dean's 2004 presidential campaign.
Of smashing success.
Well, yeah, they could have put in Trippy, who managed Howard Dean's failed 2004 presidential
It
campaign.
had its successes. I mean, it bothers me.
It broke
that-
through.
okay.
It did a lot of things that nobody expected. The 50-state strategy turned out to be brilliant, even if it was before its time.
And a part of that is like exercising your opportunities in Alabama.
Trippy, who managed Howard Dean's 2004 presidential campaign, was the chief media strategist on the Doug Jones campaign. And in this conversation, he tells the inside story of that effort. The sexual abuse allegations against Roy Moore, for instance, played a more complex role than many realize.
Complex. I'll buy that.
Yeah, the Jones campaign found that they often retribalized a race they were trying desperately to detribalize and would occasionally boost Roy Moore's numbers. We'll get back to that after the break, but it's a fascinating concept.
Okay, this break. All right, sure. We should get back to that. Is that Trippy article in this list? Usually.
It should be, but if it's not, it's going to be right at the bottom.
Yeah,
so you
let
can
me.
find it.
Oh, there, Vox. Okay, I got it. All right, we'll check on that, and we'll be right back after this brief break to catch up on all that great stuff. Thanks, Greg. Hang on just 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are back from the, like I said, from the kids' ward, distributing water and medication to try and keep the coughing to a minimum. Greg, when we last left off, we were in the middle of explaining why we were reading The Explainer or something like that.
Ezra Klein, the explainer, the Voxplainer, interviews Joe Trippy. And let me give you the nut graph, as they like to call it in the business. Trippy says the central insight of the Jones campaign, the winning Jones campaign, was that many voters, including many Trump-friendly Republicans, are you ready? You sitting down for this?
Trump-friendly
Are already exhausted by the chaos.
Oh, the chaos.
You know that word, right?
Yeah.
We've been using it for a long, long time. They're already exhausted by the chaos and hostility of Trump's Washington, and they're open to alternatives. That was the opportunity Jones exploited, and it's a lesson Trippy thinks is a model other Democrats could learn from in 2018. So Trippy's going to talk about the fact that the best thing to do with Doug Jones or Ralph Northam in Virginia or people like him is to offer the public what you might think of as semi-bland, non-threatening, normal politicians as an antidote to all the crap that's happening daily by the hour, Twitter tweets, etc., all the chaos with Donald Trump. So what they were trying to do is run against Trump without naming Trump. They were running against what Trump represents, not in terms of social justice or policy, but his persona. And they were trying to do that without invoking Trump himself, their theory being that if you just make it Republicans versus Democrats, we lose because they outnumber us like 2-1 in this state. Not quite that, but pretty bad. So what you have to do is you have to make it a race of chaos versus order. You can't make it good versus evil because they'll choose the wrong side. You have to make it chaos versus order.
Okay.
And if you do that, at least you have a good shot of winning.
Well, law and order is usually a pretty decent platform in Alabama.
Right. So now they had this whole idea of how to run this campaign even before Roy Moore is the nominee. And so Klein says to Trippi, what's your argument to Jones for why it's even possible that he might win? Trippi says, I thought Trump was actually driving people to want to end the chaos. Even if you liked him, you didn't want more chaos in Washington than he was already creating. You get that from all the polls that say, yeah, I like him, I support him. I'm one of 35 different people sitting in this McDonald's that you come and interview every 2 weeks, and I'm telling you, I'm so support, but I don't like that he tweets.
Yeah.
Well, what does I don't like that he tweets mean? They don't like the chaos. And so I thought if we could appeal to that in Alabama, that would get us close. So they agreed. And they also believed they could get a significant turnout, particularly in the African-American community, because of Doug's prosecuting the Klan, Trippi says. So that he had a real attachment to the community and commitment to the community and vice versa. And if you could pull those two things together, get enough Republicans to believe we're going to find common ground and at the same time not have the message dampen the enthusiasm that was naturally there for a guy like Doug Jones, maybe we could pull it off.
Okay.
So Ezra Klein says, so tell me where the election was in your estimation before the stories about Roy Moore's predations. And Trippi says, we know where the election was. We know exactly. The day before the Washington Post story, we were behind by 1 point. And the day before the election, we were ahead by 2 points. So as far as we're concerned, all those other polls that were all over the place, 11 points, 8 points, we feel we were always on top of the pulse of what was happening. It was a dead heat the day before, and it was a dead heat when the allegations came out, and it was a dead heat at the election, he's saying.
Okay.
The key to us having a chance was to de-tribalize the politics of the state. If Alabama was reacting to tribal politics, no way for us to win. And in a weird way, the allegations created tribalism again. You either believe the charges or you don't believe the charges. And now we're back into Republicans who don't believe the charges because Democrats are saying it, and the media out to get Roy Moore. And that all worked against them, he says. He's able to start tribalizing the race, Trippi says. Trump begins coming in with him, and every time that happened, Roy Moore would open up a small lead.
Okay.
Klein says, so you're saying the allegations in some ways help Moore? And Trippi said, in a weird way, yeah, because what people didn't like about Moore was the fact that he'd been removed from office twice, the fact that he had started a religious charity and taken $1 million from it after he told everybody he wasn't making any money. Those things were knocked off the charts by the allegations, and those other allegations, the other problems that people had with him, cut across party lines. If you take $1 million and lie about it, there's plenty of Republicans who are scratching their heads, but when it comes to the sex allegations, suddenly there's a fake yearbook, he's able to create doubt, he pushes against the mainstream media, he's playing right into the Trump handbook. And so what happens is there'd be a 4-point move. We could be behind by a point or ahead by a point. Trump would go out in the White House and say something like, Roy Moore is who we need. We got to save the seat. Trash Doug Jones, weak on crime. Moore would move to like a 3 or 4 point lead, but only for a couple of days, and then it would drift back. So the natural state of the race was a tie.
Okay.
And then Trippi says, and the thing I still wonder about is Trump goes down on Friday in Pensacola.
Yes, right.
Okay, and the election's Tuesday. And Trippi says, thank you for not going Sunday.
Okay.
Because Friday night, Moore went ahead by 4 points. Saturday, it was 3. Sunday, it was 2. And Tuesday, they won by 2.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's definitely an argument to be made.
Right? But the key to thinking about it from our point of view is, wait a minute. 4 points, that's it in Alabama? Trump won by 28 points here. And all he could do is move Roy Moore by 4 points at best. And that's it. So we got a chance here because Trump is not the juggernaut, and Moore is not a good candidate. And so, those two things, it's not working. So so Klein says, well, you think, then the conventional wisdom is, so there's no sex allegations. None of this comes up. The Washington Post story is not written. You don't know about Roy Moore's fondness for teenage girls.
Yeah.
None of that happens. And Doug Jones absolutely loses. Do you agree? And Trippi says, no, the opposite. We'll never know. But without this whole allegation mess, we think we win.
Yes, I'm sure he does think that.
And the polling is, these numbers are why he's saying that.
Yeah. I mean, he's like I say, he's got a point, and I think the best point ends where we say, well, it's complex. And then it becomes,
it is.
well, you need me to run your campaign, then you'll be good.
I mean, it's hard to turn back and say, okay, these sex allegations helped Roy Moore. That's not true.
That is difficult.
But he has a good explanation for why it didn't just sink him.
Yes. And I think, like I said, he's got a point, and I think it's a complex one. And it was best when it stayed complex. Of course, you got to end a argument like this by saying, well, P.S. Hiring me is a magic formula. I alone recognize such things, and I will save your campaign, and it'll be well worth your money if you hire me because I'm such a genius. But I think he may be overstating the case to some extent, but it certainly was more complex, and he makes a great point that about it driving tribalism. There absolutely was a backlash where people said, I don't care what they say about him.
See, this is why I like poll numbers. Yeah. He's actually got support from the data for his point of view. I get that he wants to make the case that he's great, so you can go ahead and hire him, especially after the last campaign that he ran that was so well publicized, didn't end so well. Yeah, I get all of that.
Right.
But the numbers support him.
They do support him. Well, they support they support an interpretation, certainly, that he doesn't stray too far from. I mean, another interpretation is the juggernaut of Trump that won the state by 28 points could only move Roy Moore by 4 because Roy Moore was a child molester and everybody knew it. That's also a possibility.
And they also didn't stay up. They came right back down.
Yeah.
And now here's another point. What Doug Jones can teach Democrats in 2018, this will be a little more controversial. But interesting nonetheless. Trippy says, I think Trump, even with his own supporters who like him, has created enough hostility and chaos. I love that he keeps using that word. It's such a good word. That's why we picked it early to describe what was going on here. He's created enough hostility and chaos that voters don't want more of it. They can tolerate it with him, but they don't want more. Yes. I think it's an almost infinite hunger in the country right now for ending the division, hatred, and the hate talk. And I think that's why suburban women, we talked about in the show yesterday, are gravitating toward the Democrats.
Okay.
Women with college degrees are gravitating toward the Democrats. Even women without college degrees, even men without college degrees are gravitating to the Democrats, although not quite as much. But people are tired of it. And it also explains a lot about how Trump can do X and then somebody else does X and they don't get away with it. Why does Trump get away with it and nobody else does? Because they're sick of the chaos. They don't want more of it. I think eventually they're going to get tired of Trump too. But right now they want Gorsuch and other judges, and they want libtards to take it in the chin, and he's their vehicle to have that done. Yeah. But it turns out he's the only one. They're not using the Republican Party like that. So just running on a Trump agenda, as Steve Bannon found out to his dismay and chagrin, they're not interested in that, and they don't want to use the party as their proxy. They just want Trump and nobody else.
Yeah.
Is that cultish? Is that but that's how the voting patterns are looking.
I can believe that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it exactly. I would have to read through it and digest it elsewhere, I think.
Yeah. It's just really, really food for thought, which challenges the whole conventional wisdom of what happened. Here's another piece. Joe Trippi said, we had a primary. It wasn't a fight. We didn't have to fend off a bunch of people who might have been out there saying, wait a minute, what are you doing? When we begin talking about finding common ground with Republicans, they had an ad called the Honor Ad. They highlighted Gettysburg and the Battle of Little Round Top. Yeah. And Ezra Klein says, can we talk about that ad for a minute? And it's got the ad there if you want to look at that at a later date. Because I think the ad is unusual. You have an ad that's about Gettysburg in Alabama. Yes. And the point of the ad is Doug Jones would like to go to work with some Northerners on legislation. How did you get there? Let's remind Alabama of the Civil War, and that's a good idea for us. How did that happen?
Yeah.
And Trippi says, well, we were trying to internalize what Doug Jones has been saying to us about why he was running. The chair of the campaign, Giles Perkins, not a media guy, he came up with this home run line that there's honor in compromise and civility. And Doug didn't blink. He said, that's why I'm running. So we wanted to show that people are working together and that Washington shouldn't be a battlefield. And their campaign, Trippy and their campaign, felt that was a strong message for them. And that's why they won in Alabama. That doesn't mean that you win everywhere. But that gets to the point of we only want Democrats who will punch Republicans in the nose and stick a stick in their eye, because they've been doing that to us, and it's about time we did it to them. And we need people with backbone and spine and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're taking the opposite approach and saying that doesn't win.
In Alabama.
In Alabama, but they're saying nationally that doesn't win either.
Yeah,
Again,
that's what they're saying.
Northman in Virginia, just taking the approach that all we're going to do is stick a stick in the other side's eye is not good enough. And interestingly, if you talk to people, if you talk to our own, cohort, our folks about this, they'll say, look, everybody knows you don't win on policy. People don't vote on policy. So all of this, well, what do Democrats stand for in 2020 and 2018? Where are their policy, media always says this, where are their policy statements and papers and stuff and all the stuff that we're not going to read, but we're going to yell at you for not having?
Yeah, even if you have.
We're not going to pay attention to, even if you do, because then we'll just change the subject.
Right.
Where is all that stuff? What do you guys stand for? And what Doug Jones is saying, what Trippy is saying, is that I'll tell you what we stand for. We stand for honesty. We stand for fairness. We stand for civility. We stand for doing it right. We stand for the rule of law. We stand for, the norms of America that Trump has disrupted and that people are sick of. And that is a winning campaign. Northam won on it. We'll win on it. There'll be parts of what we do that you won't like. But overall, if you're looking at the general public, that's what they want. They're sick of this chaos. I just think it's a fascinating point of view. You can pick it apart and you can say in spots in various parts of the country that will or won't work. But as an overall theme, it appears to be emerging. And, it could be a winning theme for 2018.
It is well worth keeping in mind that there are places where that will be fantastic, and it may even be the majority of places.
But it may be the swing places. That's really the point. It may not be.
Yeah.
You don't need this in Berkeley. You don't need this in Ann Arbor.
Right.
But you might need it in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, where you just had a Republican who's either going to step down or just got thrown out because he had a scandal about trying to impregnate his staff, the kind of stuff that happens in elections.
Yes. And so all politics is local unless I come up with a better idea nationally, at which point you're an idiot for not using it in state B, because I had it in state A and it was great. I understand.
So Ezra Klein finishes and says, my gut is that for Democrats, the winning message in 2020 is basically, it doesn't have to be like this.
Yes. Well, that's
It doesn't have to feel like this.
Right. And then what? Right? I don't know. Maybe. Or they say, okay, but then what else? I heard you. What else have you got? Okay, well, we can talk
now
about
that you're paying attention, we have
someone
this
will
and
win.
that, but that's not why you vote.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I don't know. I have a feeling that there will be more necessary and that there will be lots of local variants. And, of course, after which both candidates and consultants will insist that their local variant is the one that will also work across the country somewhere else. We just finished with that in Virginia. Well, okay, Ralph Northam, he ran that sort of race. Oh, and we were immediately faced with, there was a district here in the House of Delegates where an out loud and proud Democratic Socialist won, despite all the efforts of the local Democratic establishment to make sure that he wasn't the nominee or that he lost when he was the nominee, and he didn't. And people wanted this. Well, sometimes under local conditions, they do.
Sometimes it's about traffic.
Yeah.
But I'm stepping back and looking at the big picture and telling you that I sure miss all of those Ralph Northam is doing it wrong articles. Here's why he's losing his election articles, He's not aggressive enough. He's not this. He's not that. And actually, he was a good fit for Virginia, and he won by a significant amount.
Yes. Oh, well, of course, it was immediately followed by, now he says he's going to, either roll back or not ask for a Medicaid expansion.
Right, we
Oh,
talked
well,
about
hold
that
on a
yesterday. What
second.
he's actually asking for
Yeah.
is some cost cutting with it.
Yeah.
And it may actually be that he winds up working with a 51-49 or, depending upon the coin flip and the lawsuits, 50-50
Right.
House of Delegates. So we'll see.
Yes, well, I mean, he's definitely got a tricky position. It's just that this seems very very changeable. There's as much chaos in trying to decide whether he's doing well or turning his back on his winning coalition day by day, hour by hour, as there was in the question of whether or not to continue with Trumpism.
Yeah, well, the other side of the coin, of course, is give up your hate, young Jedi. That way lies the dark side. And it turns out giving up that hate may well be a way to win elections in 2018 and 2020, because by the time we get there, people, may well be sick of Trump. We already know from the polls that 49% of the public loathes him, strongly disapproves. And that's a good base to build on.
But don't you hate chaos?
Chaos,
I dislike it.
I do, and I would like to return to older norms. I would like to return to regular order.
Right.
Whatever
Well,
the heck
that would be
means.
nice. By the way, that's not I don't think that's a particularly resonant one. That phrase.
No. I'll say it on
throw
the
out
show
regular
to
order.
process people, but I
Right.
am not suggesting that the Democrats run on a platform of
We ought to
returning
be
to regular order.
Yeah, it's the committee
They might get John
process, you
McCain's
see,
vote,
that-
but then again, they might not.
Right. It depends what day it is and whether he's going to get a tax cut out of it.
And what he ate for breakfast. And, I don't know that Susan Collins is going to be on board. She's going to hold out for 3 more things that are promised to her in a later date.
Yes,
so we don't know.
doesn't
But
get.
it's just fascinating following these elections.
Uh-oh.
And I think it's really important to look at Alabama in the context of the way Trippi and Klein spell it out, not because they're right and everybody else is wrong, but it's a different way of thinking about it that really, adds more facets to how things actually work and the way people vote.
Yes. We're in trouble now. Armando is calling. I'm not sure. What the real problem is, I think that if I simply answer his call, this is something that
it's easy. I have to go.
Oh, okay.
So you can answer the call and it won't screw up your 3-way
That's
calling.
it.
We did figure out how to do that at one point, but
Yes,
I forgot
I
what.
had
I
to
think
call
he calls
out.
and then I call, or whatever.
I had to call him.
Or you put a quarter in the back of your
Yes.
laptop. Is that how it's
Skype needs to fix this. This is one of their big improvements is if a third person calls that you would like to add to a 3-way call, you can't do it. That's the improvement.
They've made it so Armando can't yell at me.
Yeah. I have to call him in order to allow him to yell at you.
Anyway, yeah, if he actually has time to come on the show and talk, that'd be great, because I think, I'm not saying that Trippi and Klein are right. I'm saying it's good to think about it in a different way, and maybe it'll even crystallize your own opinions of how these things go. Take care, and I will talk to you next week,
All
not
right.
Monday.
Very good. Yes, we're going to have to take that day off, I think. Everyone will want to sleep in.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you. You do the same if it's not too chaotic for you. And how would I rate this call? I would rate this call pretty good, except for I can't do 3-way calling. I wonder why they did that. It used to be the case. This is extremely important to everybody. It used to be the case that if a third call, it was easy. Armando called, right? You had 2 options, 3 options, 4 options. That's how, okay. The 4th option was don't do it. Ignore the whole thing. That's not really an option. Active options were hang up the call that you are on now and take this call instead. 2, add this caller to a 3-way call with the person you're already talking to. And 3 was put the current call on hold and then go answer the other call, and then you could switch back and forth. The new and improved Skype offers you this option. Hang up or put the person on hold. You can no longer, you can make a 3-way conference, but you have to be the one calling to do it. I don't understand why the 2 options aren't still there. All right, well, let's see. Armando, should I call you? How about that? Let me see. What happened? I wonder whether he's running around. Let's try call. Look, there's even a button that says call back. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. It's probably going to make some noise. Yeah, here's the ringing noise. Now we have to listen to the ringing noise. Now, if he's not immediately at his phone, we're going to have to listen to this ringing noise for like a long time. And I have a feeling that it's going to go on for...
The person whom you're trying to
Oh,
reach
listen to
is
this.
currently unavailable.
Currently
Please
unavailable.
leave a message after...
That's no chance I'm happening. Okay, well, I'll try typing him a message and letting him know what we're doing. Maybe during the next break we can arrange... Oh, incoming call. Wait a second. One computer says there's an incoming call. The important one says there isn't. So, okay, fine. Not really sure how to deal with that, but we'll see if we can figure it out during the next break. All right. I'll tell him that. To figure it out during the next break. Boy, fun. Okay. Anyway, Greg has also sent along an additional item here for us to take a look at. It says to make us laugh, and also some instructions about what we should ask Armando when he gets on the air. Cameron Grant on Twitter, Trump's first exclusive, and it is a picture of Trump being interviewed in clown face. But as Joker face. I guess is one of the fun things that Photoshop and the like have brought us in the last 5 years or so, is the ability to totally fake up video. So he's there as being interviewed as the Joker from the Batman movies. Trump's first exclusive interview about the Alabama Senate. That goes way back. But it's actually kind of worrisome because now it looks like there was video. You could offer this as video evidence that he showed up in clown makeup for his interview. And someone will believe that. Not me, not today. But it is worrisome what you can do with computerized graphics these days. All right. So let's see. Where were we? Perhaps it might be a good way of using our few minutes before the top of the hour break to go into detail about Yair Rosenberg's piece in the New York Times about being a digital Nazi hunter. Because, it brings up a lot of different topics and a lot of interesting angles to see the full story. Like many Jewish journalists, he begins, who reported on Donald Trump's presidential campaign, I spent the election being harassed by a motley crew of internet racists who coalesced around the future president. They sent me threats, photoshopped me, into gas chambers, and hurled an uncreative array of anti-Semitic slurs my way. A study by the Anti-Defamation League found that I'd received the second most abuse of any Jewish journalist on Twitter during the campaign cycle. My parents didn't raise me to be number 2. Fortunately, there's always 2020. Haha. Okay. As a result, though, I've become something of an unintentional expert on alt-right trolls and their tactics. For the most part, these characters are largely laughable, sad, angry men hiding behind images of cartoon frogs, deathly afraid that their employers will uncover their online antics. But there are also more insidious individuals whose digital skullduggery can be more consequential than the occasional bigoted bromide. And so last November, in the wake of Trump's victory, I decided to turn the tables on them. My target? Impersonator trolls, a very specific type of troll. You probably haven't heard of these trolls because you're not cool enough, I guess. But that is precisely why they are so pernicious. These bigots are not content to harass Jews and other minorities on Twitter. They seek to assume their identities and then defame them. The con goes like this. The impersonator lifts an online photo of a Jew, Muslim, African American, or other minority, typically one with clear identifying markers, like a yarmulke-clad Hasid or a woman in hijab. Using that picture as a Twitter avatar, the bigot then adds ethnic and progressive descriptors to the bio. Jewish, Zionist, Muslim, enemy of the alt-right, whatever combination you think will work for you. False identity forged, the trolls then insert themselves into conversations with high-profile Twitter users. Conversations that are often seen by tens of thousands of followers and proceed to say horrifically racist things. In this manner, unsuspecting readers glancing through their feed are given the impression that someone who looks like, say, a religious Jew or Muslim is outlandishly bigoted. Thus, an entire community is defamed. And there are embedded in here some screen caps of examples of this kind of activity of a comically stereotypical Jewish character, essentially here, saying horribly racist things about Muslims, and the idea, of course, being to start a fight using this character. The deception is relatively simple, but it is disturbingly effective. Most casual users aren't likely to reverse image search a troll's avatar to see if it was stolen from someone else, or peruse the account's other tweets and realize that it only shares racist material. Twitter lacks the cultural competency to police such impersonators, even if it were interested in doing so. And by the way, any of you have really good applications for using for reverse image searches? I've been using a site called tineye.com to do image searching, and I wondered whether any of you have better suggestions, or perhaps there are some of you who always wished you could do image searching and didn't have any idea where to start. tineye.com was a pretty good basic image searcher, I found. Interested in your suggestions. Anyway, so Rosenberg says, I set out to unmask them, and so he did. I asked my own Twitter followers whether it might be possible to create a bot that would reply to these imposters and expose their true nature to any users they tried to fool. Neil Chandra, a talented developer in San Francisco, whom I've never met, replied, I can try and throw something together, and in fact he did, and Imposter Buster was born. Try and squeeze in just a little bit more before the break. Using a crowdsourced database of impersonator accounts, carefully curated by us to avoid any false positives, the bot patrolled Twitter and interjected whenever imposters tried to insinuate themselves into a discussion. Within days, our golem for the digital age had become a runaway success, garnering thousands of followers and numerous press write-ups. Most important, we received countless thank yous from alerted would-be victims. The impersonator trolls seethed. Some tried changing their usernames. Did it work? We'll be back after this break to continue with the story. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Networks Radio. We just have that brief break up at the top of the hour. Message dispatched to Armando to let him know that he can call in at any point that he likes after the break. After this break or any other break, as a matter of fact. I don't know why three-way calling has to be so complicated. Maybe I misunderstand it. Maybe some of you who are listening are programmers for Skype. I doubt that very much. But if so, figure out how to make that easy again. It used to be really simple. Do you want this caller to be added to a three-way call? Yes. That's fine. All right. So we've got a 5-minute warning on Armando there. Let's continue with this story, just because it's much more important than I gave it credit for in my short update or short summary of it, just to try to fit it in before Greg called in. But as we were saying when we left off, the impersonator trolls who were caught by this imposter buster seethed. Some tried changing their usernames to evade the bot. It didn't work. Others simply reverted to their openly neo-Nazi personas, which is actually better. A few even tried to impersonate the bot, which was vastly preferable from our perspective and rather amusing. Then the problems began, but not from where you might expect. The Nazis realized they couldn't beat the bot, which means it's a good thing, right? Well, we got to stop that. They couldn't beat the bot, so they started mass reporting it to Twitter for, quote, harassment. Just as they duplicitously cast themselves as minorities, they now disingenuously recast our responses to their ongoing abuse as harassment. And guess what happened? Twitter sided with the Nazis. Who could have predicted it? In April, the service suspended Imposter Buster without explanation and reinstated it only after being contacted by the ADL's, Anti-Defamation League's, cyber hate team. I guess they had to call and vouch for this Imposter Buster. Over the next few months, we fine-tuned the bot to reduce its tweets and avoid tripping any of Twitter's alarms. As the trolls continued to report the bot to no avail, we thought the problem was resolved, but we were wrong. This month, Twitter suspended the bot again, and this time refused to revive it. The company's justifications were both entirely accurate and utterly absurd. quote, a large number of people have blocked you in response to high volumes of untargeted, unsolicited, or duplicative content or engagements from your account, we were informed. This was true. Imposter Buster had been blocked by many neo-Nazis. Quote, a large number of spam complaints have been filed against you. Yes, by neo-Nazis. You send large numbers of unsolicited replies or mentions. Yes, to neo-Nazis. The real threat, apparently, was not these trolls, who today continue to roam the platform unchallenged, but our effort to combat them. The great irony of this whole affair is that the imposter buster was doing Twitter's job for it. The platform has been notoriously prone to abuse since its inception and has struggled to curb it. Rather than asking Twitter to provide a top-down solution, however, we created a bottom-up one. We used Twitter's tools to police itself until Twitter fired the sheriff. If the platform is going to rescue itself from the trolls, it will need to foster these efforts, not fight them. Given the terabytes of data uploaded daily to platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, it is simply unfeasible to expect them to effectively regulate their content. It is also unwise because we should not trust giant corporations governed by profit motives rather than the public interest to decide what we can and cannot say on the internet. But perhaps more important, if there is anything more important, the top-down approach is wrong because it assumes that the problem of bigotry and abuse is something we can simply sweep under the rug through better censorship rather than by building a better online community that actively sidelines bigots and abusers through self-policing and collective norms. Ultimately, the only way to fix social media is through nurturing a healthier culture below, not imposing diktats from above. The vast majority of users are not racists and can be mobilized through communal projects like Imposter Buster, a bot built by two people on different coasts using a database compiled by users around the world to marginalize those who are. The problem with Twitter, in other words, wasn't too much Imposter Buster. It was too little. The sooner companies like Twitter understand this, the better off we'll all be. So a much larger point included in all of that, as well as the small but important point of, hey, you guys can't tell the qualitative difference between fostering a bunch of discussion but having it be neo-Nazi discussion, or fostering some other amount of discussion and having it include pointing out who the neo-Nazis are. And no, having your neo-Nazism pointed out isn't harassment, it's just accurate. But yeah, these algorithms essentially that they set up for themselves, just, I guess because they try to make them content neutral, or allegedly try to make them content neutral, end up missing the point, because the content is the point. And how they could overlook that, I really have no idea. Anyway, lots more happening as well. Lots of things to talk to Armando about. And also, I mentioned to you that there was another story out there now that arises from this discussion of trolls and the different genres of trolls out there. By the way, before we even jump to that, speaking of the neo-Nazis, a great tweet put together yesterday by Brandt, who tweets as Urban Achiever. It's a misspelled Urban Achiever. Ooh, here comes Armando. The 5-minute clock having run out. Good morning, Armando. How you doing? Are you there? Oh, okay. For some reason that hung up rather quickly. It registers as a missed call despite the fact that I answered the phone. So if you're at home listening, you will know that I did in fact answer your call. You should try again, or I could call you, I guess. I can hit the call back button. No, I'm reluctant to do that. Who knows what the situation is. You may have gotten another call. Perhaps that very frequently happens to you. And this will be of interest to you anyway. Urban Achiever, Brandt, as I described him. By the way, if you want to follow along, Urban, spelled as you would expect. Achiever, they just eliminate the last E. Oh, there we are. Achiever. And I'll tell you in a few minutes what that's all about. Let's see if Armando is on the other side this time. Good morning, Armando.
Hey.
There you are.
Good morning, David. Sorry for all the confusion.
You're driving. I see. Okay. No problem.
Yes, I am driving in my normal spot when I call you, though.
Yes.
995 South on my way to Miami.
They have good reception there. I'll just throw in a few sound effects for you. Watch where you're going, please.
Well, listen, I actually was calling in because I thought Greg's segment was interesting. I have a few points to make about it. If you're interested in hearing them.
We always
I think, number one, I think it's very dangerous to take many lessons from that Alabama contest. It really was sui generis. It's not that replicable. But there are factors in it that are worth noting. The fact that I think one of the exit poll findings that Greg didn't mention was pretty significant. Which is the people who went out to vote in the Alabama Senate race. Amongst them, Trump had a 48-48 approval split.
Okay.
Which I think is an underlying factor in everything. Now, I get what Trippy was saying, or at least as Greg described what Trippy was saying about, reaching out and all that other stuff. And that has its place. I think you have to put it all in context. The race in Alabama was close because Trump is historically unpopular, even in Alabama, for a Republican. That's just something you have to accept, that the most important issue in every race, in every part of the country, first and foremost is Trump. And you're not going to have a chance in red states unless Trump is very unpopular.
Yeah.
I.e. Alabama. And how that, that's contextually. I mean, 48-48 isn't terrible if it was national, but it's Alabama. He needs to be 65 in Alabama. Because if he's not 65 in Alabama, he's 32 nationally, which is what he is. So I think that's the first point. The shaping of what the electorate feels about Trump, and that impacts every Republican in every race, be it in New York, Alabama, Indiana, Missouri, Montana. I'm picking those states because there's less Senate races there, and Virginia, New Jersey that we saw earlier this year. So I think that's always got to be the first understanding, that the almost every election, but particularly the 2018 midterms, will be a referendum on Trump. Now, Greg was talking about this notion of not wanting chaos for even people who like or don't dislike Trump, and I think that's a valid point on certain marginal voters. But at the end of the day, it's still about Trump. That's still a referendum on Trump. You may not hate him, but you are voting because of him one way or another. So I think that's always got to be the overhang. Now, Trippy is interesting because if you'll recall, when Trippy reached national prominence was when he was campaign manager for Howard Dean's campaign 13 years ago or 14 years ago in the 2004 race. And, of course, Trippy's candidate at the time made the famous speech at the California Democratic Party convention about being in the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
What he wants to know. What I want to know. It's one of the great political speeches, and I think people forget how groundbreaking it was. And it really, though he lost, he really did change the Democratic Party from that run.
Yeah.
And I say this, losing primary campaigns in particular, can really be just as important as the winning campaign at times. John Kerry won the primary, lost the election. So at the end of the day, frankly, the more impacting campaign of 2004 on the Democratic side was Howard Dean's, much more so than John Kerry's. Mm-hmm. Maybe that turns out to be the case with Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton in the future. We'll see. But I think that it's interesting is that Trippy ran that, basically no holds barred. No, I will not cooperate with Republican presidential campaign that really set a tone. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, now he's defending. And listen, his job was to get his guy elected. And that's important.
I mean, maybe it means he's not a bad consultant, perhaps.
Oh, he's a good consultant.
No.
And I think one thing about Trippy, and sometimes when you evaluate him on how many campaigns has he won, is he doesn't win that many. He's always got the long shot. I mean, he's always been a long shot campaign manager. I don't think that's because he's bad or not top tier. That's his makeup. That's who he is. He likes that challenge. And he's made a living at it. So, I give him a lot of credit, and I'm frankly very happy for him to have this win in Alabama. I'm happy for all of us.
Sure.
So I think that's context I wanted to give to what Greg was saying about, the idea of, you just can't be against Trump. I don't know if he said that exactly, but the feeling was you can't just be against Republicans. Let's work. Let's not make chaos. I think that's fine for trying to get those marginal voters in purple states to cross over.
Yeah.
And go from there. But the reality is that the first condition that makes this a very favorable climate for the Democrats in 2018 is that Trump is incredibly unpopular, and midterms are first and foremost 80%, 90% of the vote, referendums on the president. It's a negative vote. It always has been, and we're not changing that now. Most elections are negative votes, really, to be honest with you. But be that as it may, I think that context is important to understand what Greg is saying. And I think if he places it in that context, his points are pretty salient. But you've got to, I think, really look at the context that Trump is historically unpopular for a first-year president. I think that the Gallup most poll is pretty telling. I think he's the first-year president in a long time to not be voted the most admired person in America.
Yes.
So,
let's talk about that yesterday.
Again, I don't think it's that important in the scheme of things, but it is a signal of the level of unpopularity.
Yeah.
So those were the points I wanted to make. A few days ago, I was going to make some points, but you missed my points, and I don't know if they are worth making now. But
let's find out.
Pardon?
We can find out.
Well,
what were you talking about?
It was. I'm trying to remember now, frankly.
I can probably look it up.
I'm driving. I can't remember what it was. It goes to the issue of. I can't remember it, David. So I'm going to have to let that go until I remember.
You know what? Let's see. I've now scrolled back. I've got your messages. Let's see. You said there were two things. If we needed material, and we always do. Sessions violating his recusal and Nunes.
That's a good
one,
and I want to talk about that in the context of something else that came out yesterday. But
the other was argument that eliminating state and local taxes is just liberals paying more taxes is just desserts.
Is just desserts. Oh, yeah, because I do actually want to hit on that too. But the first one, let's talk about that because there's there was some fresh news that I think makes this even more salient. You saw the reporting. You probably talked about it yesterday about the new Trump legal strategy to attack Mike Flynn's credibility.
Right. That's part of my strategy as well. So
it's everybody's strategy, and Mike Flynn is a pretty not credible person.
Yes.
But, what about Trump? I mean, his credibility is not exactly great either. No. Here's the point that brings us back to Sessions' recusal. Sessions is recused on Mike Flynn because he was a part of the Trump campaign. And at the same time, he also, in the same hearing, prompted by a question from Chuck Grassley, recused himself from covering or rather overseeing any investigation of that involved Clinton or the Clinton Foundation.
I see. Okay.
But when I sent you that text or that message, it was at a time when it was announced, or at least reported, that Sessions had ordered reopening the Uranium One investigation.
Right. True.
Now, what is the genesis of the Uranium One investigation? That, it sounds like, from what we hear from the Louis Gohmerts of the world, that they're saying there was a bribe paid to the Clinton Foundation, i.e. Hillary and Bill Clinton, in order to get the sale approved. Now, it's cockamamie nonsense, of course, just on the basis that the president could have stopped it. President Obama at the time is the one who could have stopped the sale. The commission, the USCIS, that was formed after the Dubai ports situation in 2006, which approved sale of U.S. assets to foreign countries, had 9 members. Hillary wasn't even one. The State Department was one. From what we know from reporting, Hillary Clinton had no involvement at all. But even if she did, she's one person. Yes. She couldn't block it. That commission couldn't block it. They could vote to recommend to the president that he should block it. But unanimously, they all said it was fine with the conditions that were placed on the deal. And of course, the president wasn't told there was an issue, so he didn't do anything either. But what could this investigation then be about? What's the crime that could have happened here? Mm-hmm. Now, I read about Alan Dershowitz's new role as basically Trump's public lawyer on these things, and he always says he's just exercising his official power. Now, of course, that's just plain silly, as we know, because I'll give you an example. Bob Menendez just went on trial, and he beat it. Well, it was a mistrial, but he was not convicted of misuse of his office, right?
Yes.
In exchange for gifts of Dominican descent, and he beat the rap. But the point being, he was indicted for his official actions, according to the indictment. Now, the reality is the McDonald Supreme Court case that overturned Bob McDonnell, the former Virginia governor's conviction, frankly made the case kind of specious in the first place. I don't think there really is a way. The McDonnell decision really has made proving bribery almost impossible. The quid pro quo will never exist. Here's my suitcase for this vote. That's not how it happens. And nobody actually alleged that that's what Menendez had done.
Right.
All right. But think about what the argument is with regard to official acts of Trump. We're talking about the firing of Comey, for one thing. Yes. The urging of letting Flynn off easy. Even, let's say, pardoning Flynn. Now, the pardon is a constitutional power of the president, right? And if he exercises it, the actual pardon itself is not reviewable. But it is the president's actions himself. It's invulnerable if he had a improper purpose, i.e. obstruction of justice.
Right.
Or accepting a bribe. I'll give you the historic point that where Republicans were on the other side of this. The Mark Rich pardon by Bill Clinton on the last cycle of pardons in his presidency.
Yes.
His ex-wife, had given a large donation to the Clinton Foundation, or gave one sometime after. And there was a special counsel appointed to investigate.
Right.
Interestingly, that special counsel was one James Comey. And he said there was no evidence of corruption in the process. the point I'm making there is no one doubted that it was a tricky legal issue, but no one said, well, you can't just bribe a president. If you could prove that you could bribe a president, that a president had been bribed to give a pardon, that would be a crime.
Yes.
Right?
Normally, you would think so.
Right. So if the president, and again, I don't know that this would be a successful strategy for him. I think Trump's legal team thinks not, because there appear to be state charges that are chargeable against Flynn. That seems to be the consensus view, though I don't have any independent reporting done on that. But the idea is, if the president pardoned Flynn in order to get him to not testify, though, again, I don't know that works, but if he promises him one at the end of his term and gives it to him, say Trump doesn't run for re-election, and he pardons Flynn on January 20th of 2021. Well, why did he do it? If Flynn didn't testify, if he took the rap, what have you, would that be something that could be potentially criminal? I think it could be. And I don't think it's outlandish or anti-constitutional or political witch hunt to say it.
Yeah.
I mean, the president, Trump, is, I say this in the strictest terms, he's a fellow who's broken laws throughout his life.
Yes.
And in some cases, those laws were criminal. Now, has he gotten away with it? Has he been indicted? No. A lot of white collar criminals get away with it. But here he's sitting as president of the United States, and we're all seeing what he did. I mean, the whole Comey experience was, very clear that he said it to Lester Holt. It was because of the Russia thing. Well, the Russia thing was a threat to him. And I don't know why he thought that would end it. Maybe he thought that, Sessions would then step back in, or Rosenstein would do his bidding. I don't know what his thought process is. I don't think he's a bright man. But his intent was to obstruct the investigation of the Russia matter. He said it himself on national television. The famous Saturday Night Live skit.
True also. Oh, we may be losing your signal here. What does this mean?
He circled back into...
You still there? Okay. We hear you. But perhaps you don't hear us. Okay. Armando, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I must have hit a bad spot. I'll give you back your show. He circled himself back into the Clinton situation, despite his sworn testimony that he was recused himself from. Why do you think he wouldn't circle himself back into the Russia investigation if his recusal on Clinton was meaningless?
Yeah.
Why? What would stop him now? And I was frustrated the day I first mentioned this to you, that when the media was reporting on this, not one media person noted that Sessions had said he was recusing himself from these matters.
Yeah.
I actually think that the real threat to the Russia investigation, Bob Mueller's investigation, is Sessions deciding he's unrecused, and either through his oversight power or through simply firing Mueller, he might do it. I don't think Rosenstein's the guy that's going to fire Mueller, and I don't know if he would quit if Sessions went over his head and fired him. I think he might, but you never know. But I think it's the idea that Sessions can just step back in to a matter in which he's testified to Congress under oath that he would be recused from. Yes. And no one says a word is dangerous. because it's not that far to then say he's going to step back into the Russia investigation.
Right. I mean, once that door is open, I suppose you can unrecuse. I mean, Nunes obviously is never meant to be taken seriously on it at all.
All right. Well, look at that. You know, I mean, here's a guy who's been running a shadow campaign against his own commission's investigation.
Yes. All right. Well, we need to take our short break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Still joined here by Armando driving on 95. Is that what you said?
I am. I'm
Okay.
passing the Fort Lauderdale airport.
So there you go. Okay. Any Russians landing?
Not today.
Not at Fort Lauderdale.
yet,
Okay.
anyway.
They go to West Palm. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I will tell you something. I was trying to drive to Palm Beach
Yes.
the other day, and everything's blocked around Mar-a-Lago, so it's like half the island's blocked off.
Yeah.
And they have big signs say till January 1st, 2018. And of course, Trump famously announced that the day after Christmas, it's back to work.
Right. Yes. I believe
And
he's on
got
his
to play golf every day.
right third day in a row, I believe.
Yes, third
right-
day in a
right
row.
now.
And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he decided to lie about going back to work. It was so weird.
Yeah. I mean, I think he meant everybody else back to
I
work.
guess everybody.
Caddies back to work.
Caddy's back to work.
Apparently, I got to.
Yeah,
he's got to have his vacations.
It's all very
but-
weird.
Yeah, he's just an idiot, and what can you do? So he plays a lot of golf. Now, he shouldn't have said, I'm not going to, and he shouldn't lie now, like, I don't play golf. And there are people out there saying, oh, he's taking meetings. You don't have any idea what kind of business can be conducted on a golf course. Sure I do. But he's a moron, so he's not conducting any business. You have no idea that he can't conduct
beyond
business
that,
in an
should we
office.
know who he's conducting business with?
Yes, obviously, and now they keep moving trucks in the way so that you can't see who he's supposedly conducting business with. Yes, somebody had a great point yesterday in saying, the people who said you have to bring your ID to vote now think that everybody should have completely anonymous access to the president.
Right, exactly. And I'll go further. I mean, the emoluments aspect of this is just so accepted now. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. The president of the United States is making money from deciding where he will vacation because the United States government has to pay him.
Yeah, we really have to get a good breakdown of the numbers because I did see somebody float a number of the total cost of his golfing so far, and I don't know that I trust the number. I didn't see any substantiation of the number, but the number that was thrown out was north of $91 million, which I imagine includes all the flight time and fuel charges and operating costs of Air Force One, plus all the salaries of Secret Service, plus of course all the cart rentals. But yeah, some amount of that money is going into his pocket as he rents golf carts to the people charged with following him around while he plays golf. He doesn't get to pocket the operating costs of Air Force One, but something. And who knows?
I'm just stunned that it's so blatantly a violation of the domestic emoluments clause. I want to re-explain that because the domestic emolument clause says the president has one source of income while he's president. One.
Yes.
That can come from the government, from the federal or state government, and that is his salary. He cannot receive payments of any kind, in theory, for anything else, and yet he does. Yeah. You talk about it, and it's funny, the golf cart rentals, but he shouldn't be able to collect that according to the Constitution.
Right, and I guess I don't know whether they're it's a mixed bag between just plain ignoring it because I don't know what the hell to do if the president is in daily obvious violation of the Constitution. There's nothing in there that says this automatically happens. You have to decide politically whether or not you're going to enforce the Constitution or not, and they've decided not to. Not to mention the curveball of, I'm not accepting it. My pass-through corporation is.
Is it more complicated? Is it more complicated that the United States government is writing a check to Trump, the Trump organization that owns the Mar-a-Lago Club or the golf course?
Right. Is it more complicated?
Straight up, he's getting a check from the government that he's not supposed to get.
Well,
is that more complicated than
LLC is getting it?
The convoluted Clinton cash, Frank Justra made a contribution in 2007 and Then 3 years later, when he wasn't a shareholder anymore, Uranium One got sold.
No, it's not. And by
the New York
his
Times ran a
supporters
week
are
of stories
that's
excerpting
true.
this nonsense.
And his supporters are super sleuths. They're Sherlock Holmes when it comes to this FBI agent's wife once ran for office and got contributions from other people who happen to be Democrats, because Democrats, like Republicans, support members of their own party with contributions. And he went to work for a guy who later on did this, and he emailed that. That they're able to piece together. They got charts, they got strings, like in the office, connecting the different newspaper clippings they've hung on their wall.
Right, it's like a Glenn Beck show.
You just paid Donald Trump $10,000 from out of the government coffers. That doesn't register with you? No, it's an LLC. That's different. All right.
This is what I get to. This is part of my frustration with the media. They pretended. No, and let me not say pretended. It was a real appearance issue. If Hillary Clinton was president, the Clinton Foundation could not operate. That's just a fact.
Right.
I mean, there was a clear appearance issue. If there's just no way you could have allowed that, and that's just for a charitable foundation, not money going straight into a Clinton pocket. Here, the president of the United States is getting checks that he's not supposed to get from the United States government, and nobody says a word. There's no New York Times story on this.
Not enough.
They're bad at their job. I mean, I get back to this because this is an obvious one to me.
Yeah.
It's not complicated. The lease for the Washington, D.C. hotel is wrong. It's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Legal analysis is very clear. The lease said that if you are a government official, it would be canceled.
Right.
The President of the United States is a government official.
Well, yes. Of course, all you have to do, apparently, is put out a letter that says, but is he really? And then that's enough.
No, you know what? You remember the letter that the GSA person who reviewed it said, well, he's only getting it passively or some nonsense like that. It's like, what are you talking about? He's just getting it passively.
Right.
But does it not count? Or he won't touch it while he's president. But it'll be in a big pile waiting for him when he finishes.
But he can touch it as president, of course. It's all being put in a revocable trust to which he has access at any time, including right now. Okay?
Exactly.
But he won't touch it. He won't? Why do you say that? How do you know that?
And David, it's so blatant, I get.
Yeah. Oh, we're losing your signal again, but...
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't really have any explanation for that other than just plain inertia. And, again, we don't really know what to do. There isn't anything, and maybe purposefully this was the case in the design of the Constitution, but there's nothing automatic, nothing self-executing about the Constitution. The Constitution says you can't be president unless you're 35 years of age. And if we were to elect someone who was 33 years of age, everyone would stand around and say, but this is so obvious. What are we going to do? And then they would realize, well, there's nothing that says just we're not going to hand you the keys. Well, we'll hem and haw. The Congress should do something. The Electoral College should be sued. We can't allow you to cast your votes. But we would be sitting here dithering over it. And it's like, the guy's 33. What do you mean? Why is he president? I didn't know. I'm obligated as a member of the Electoral College to cast my vote as my state voted. I'm bound to cast it for him. But it's an illegal candidate. Well, that's what you say. Maybe he was conceived early. Maybe he's a frozen embryo. I don't know. We'd be standing around with our thumbs up our butts saying, but it says this. And then, but especially if if the candidate's a Republican, forget about it. Well, 33, 35, it's all relative. He's 35 at heart. I don't know. We would come up with a reason, and we would not know how to do it.
You're right. It's not self-executing.
Yeah.
And, of course, there was the emoluments case that was dismissed in the Southern District of New York. And it may be that the result will end up being the correct one on the standing issue. But the decision itself is very poorly written and reasoned. And if the Second Circuit is going to uphold them, it's going to have to come up with some better thought processes than what the district court, who basically said, I want no part of this. I'll just write some gobbledygook and say case dismissed. Yeah. I mean, it's really what happened. It's kind of embarrassing for him, to be honest with you.
Well, gobbledygook is in fashion.
But when his point, I guess, was though is hey, it's up to Congress.
Yeah,
Congress has it. Congress could sanction these payments of emoluments to the president. Of course, the Congress could do anything. It could impeach the president too.
Yes.
But it really made no sense. But the point is that it's not self-executing. This is me buttressing your point that unless people do something, there you have it. Now, Marcus wrote that piece the other day. You probably discussed it already about thinking about impeachment but not talking about it for 2018.
I saw it. I actually haven't discussed it, but
I haven't given it great thought. I don't know what your thoughts are on that approach. I mean, it's a political argument that what's going to be more effective electorally, I suppose. And if he's right, he's right. If he's wrong, he's wrong. There's really no way of knowing. But I will say this in support of him. There's nothing we can do now about impeachment. I'm not sure what that means. Do you have an idea?
We seem to be losing your signal from time to time, so I'm not sure what you're asking me here.
Hello? Yeah,
yes,
I hear you.
Try it again. So you're supposing a question here. Do I have any idea?
I'll give you the question. I'm asking what we should be preparing for impeachment. Or thinking about it.
Yes.
But I'm not talking about it, and I'm not sure what that would look like. What do you do to prepare for impeachment?
I don't know. You talk about it. I mean, that's the truth.
That means talking about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I assume that he means, and to be honest, I haven't really read and digested this piece, but I assume he means rather than making it a campaign issue, you do something else.
Right.
All right.
No, and that's fine.
I mean, I get that point.
That's fine. I mean, it's 3 months to the Republicans talking about the threat of impeachment as opposed to the Democrats. To try to gin up the Trump base to get them at least to come out to vote.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to watch. But I just was struck by the idea of preparing for impeachment, which a lot of people talk about. And I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. If you don't control a committee,
yes.
If you don't control a committee, you don't even have a budget to, quote, prepare for impeachment.
Yeah, right. At this point, though, preparing for impeachment is read the newspaper. Oh, look what happened. Yeah. That's impeachable.
Well, in a sense, there's one guy who's preparing for impeachment. His name's Robert Mueller and his team.
Yeah,
they will render a report or an indictment. And certainly Ken Starr set the standard on these things, and that's how you prepare. Then you convene a committee and they review it.
Well, it's interesting. That's true. I think that's currently true, but that brings up a good point for discussion, which is that I guess the modern precedent is if the special counsel / independent counsel says something damning enough in their report and either outright recommends impeachment or makes it impossible to avoid the question of impeachment because of what's in the report, then, having seen the Clinton impeachment and that being the only modern example of something that actually proceeded to impeachment, people sort of think that, well, what happens if Mueller's report isn't clear or isn't particularly damning in the way we would like, and we get away from the question of, is it really up to a special counsel to decide whether impeachable crimes have been committed, and isn't that we've just been discussing the fact that emoluments are being soaked up like a sponge right in front of our very eyes, and it's not self-executing. The only way you can do anything about it is to have Congress decide to do something about it. That is, of course, unless somebody outside of Congress and not appointed by Congress and not even particularly accountable to Congress decides to write a report that says, here's what Congress should do, which is actually kind of maybe a separation of powers issue a little bit. You think about only the executive can recommend its own impeachment to the legislative branch. That can't really be the standard, but that's the one everyone remembers. Although the older folks who can say, well, that's not how it worked for Nixon.
As a constitutional matter, the reality is the special counsel is really
quiet. So once again, the signal being, this may be the least conducive platform for a constitutional discussion, is driving down 95.
I'm sorry, call came in.
Yeah. All right.
But I don't know where I left it off. The special counsel is actually probably the worst situation for being the impeachment evaluator. The Constitution really does vest it the power to impeach in the House of Representatives and the power to remove from office in the Senate. The special counsel is, in theory, a part of the executive branch. Certainly now, without an independent counsel law, that is absolutely true.
Yeah.
So it's hard to argue it. I think the argument for the special counsel investigating the president is really premised on an unanswered question, which is, can a sitting president be indicted?
Yes. That's the question. I don't have the answer. I think it's yes, but people say it's no. All right. Oh, this is becoming an issue here. Your connection. Why don't the connection issue is starting to get in the way of things here. Why don't we wrap for the day? And if you are in place somewhere tomorrow, Friday would be a great day.
Knock those two things out.
Sure.
And go from there.
Okay.
All right, have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You do the same, and I'll message you again. Yeah, if you happen to be available tomorrow, it'll be a good time to pick this up again. There's certainly a lot to talk about, and it wrapped up in this issue and the other one. We didn't even get to the second of your issues about state and local taxes, so maybe that will entice you to join us again tomorrow. What else have we got for discussion today? Well, there's an awful lot, and now we'll have to do some careful picking and choosing. I mentioned to you first, I guess we'll get back to the one thing that I promised, or I began before talking to Armando here about Brent. Thank you for your tweet, Urban Achiever, once again, without that second E in Achiever. Just pointing out that it is extremely weird how this stuff keeps happening to Breitbart. Breitbart, once again, has tragically been forced to part ways with a neo-Nazi in their employ, and I just thought it might be worth compiling, as Brandt has done here, at least with these 4 examples. Why does it keep happening to Breitbart that they keep having to part ways with neo-Nazis? The first example here, I think the latest, it's Paul Nehlen, the challenger to Paul Ryan, who we had mentioned earlier at the top of the show when Greg was rounding things up. Breitbart Executive Chairman Steve Bannon has cut ties with Paul Nehlen, the far-right activist who is challenging Paul Ryan for his congressional seat and who has received extremely favorable coverage from Breitbart in the past. Nehlen is dead to us, said Arthur Schwartz, an advisor of Bannon's who is familiar with the former White House chief strategist's thinking. Nehlen, who became a lightning rod for his immigrant views, has escalated his rhetoric in recent days with a number of incendiary tweets. In one tweet, Nehlen proudly revealed that he is reading, quote, The Culture of Critique, a book about Jewish culture widely considered to be anti-Semitic. In other tweets, he has used the hashtag It's Okay to Be White. The inflammatory online activity has drawn fierce scrutiny from Nehlen's critics and beckoned the question, that is, it says so, whether Breitbart, which previously published highly supportive coverage of his candidacy, still supported him. Now, that's, I guess, somebody who's not directly employed by Breitbart, but certainly closely associated with, and Breitbart being a big fan of his. So it doesn't quite count the same way as some of these other ones. There is, of course, other examples. The previous one being, or one of the previous few, being Milo Yiannopoulos, who, of course, they dropped after his own pedophilia comments scandal anyway. But the example being cited here is April 2016 video in which he sings America the Beautiful in a Dallas karaoke bar as admirers, including the white nationalist Richard Spencer, raise their arms in Nazi salutes. Brandt also grabs the example of Breitbart reporter having been revealed as the administrator of what activists have called a racist and sexist Facebook group. Jack Hadfield, running the Young Right Society, was the person in question at that point, having written, by the way, approximately 150 pieces for Breitbart by that point. And then finally, a spokesman for the conservative news organization Breitbart said on Thursday, whichever Thursday it was, it has been years since the company had any ties to a right-wing filmmaker who wrote a tweet calling for the mass killing of Muslims. The author of the tweet, Patrick Dollard, who describes himself in his Twitter account as a contributing journalist at Andrew Breitbart's Big Government, Big Peace, and Big Hollywood. Yada, yada, yada. He's anti-Muslim and a racist and a bigot. And it's been years since they had a formal relationship. But whatever, they are terminating it now. It's just, as Brandt points out, extremely weird how this keeps happening for some reason. Why does this keep happening to me over at Breitbart? I mentioned that there was another storyline out there, which I think I'll postpone for another day, about a new type of far-right, alt-right troll out there, essentially growing out of the Pepe movement, for the alt-righter in your life who thinks Pepe has lost his edge, no longer outrageous enough to Photoshop Pepe into Nazi garb and show him gassing Jews. You've got to go further than that. There's a new Pepe beyond Pepe, which is actually quite sad in its own right, but actually, as it turns out, illustrates that the people who join such a group are quite sad and weird in their own way. We'll discuss that tomorrow. The reason, though, that it came to mind today is that Paul Nehlen includes himself among this group, which is pretty amazing, and I guess just reinforces the point that, yeah, alt-rightism has progressed beyond Steve Bannon, and I guess like any movement of that sort, especially where the point isn't really to have a salient political message so much as it is to annoy, upset, and alarm anyone who seems normal by comparison, just for the lulz. Yeah, then you're going to create a monster. Just as we just spent 2017 saying, well, Republican Party, you're very much mainstreamed, bigoted, and even anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim and anti-everything else rhetoric has created a monster, and now you're sad that you can't control the monster of alt-rightism any longer. And on a much shorter time scale, we have found that now alt-righters are now having a sad that they too have created a monster that they can't control. The thing is, this doesn't lead anywhere good. Anyway, we'll get back to that. We'll discuss the other issue of the day that's getting so much discussion is also quite entertaining in its own right. And first brought to my attention by Kate Sherrill and now being very widely discussed, based on, I think, tweets last night from Jason Pinter, a Paulus Books publisher, as it turns out, and don't know actually what that means, Paulus Books, but it must be one of the imprints out there in the mainstream publishing world, and very interesting because it involves Milo Yiannopoulos, blah, 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 whatever his name is. I got the Yiannopoulos part. I shouldn't pretend that I can't say the name. His book, of course, dropped by Simon & Schuster's main imprint, as basically an unfounded piece of garbage. What's amazing that's really being revealed in all this, well, for one thing, so his book got dropped after his pedophilia comment scandal. And as somebody else pointed out, and it's somewhere here, if I can just find the tweet here. Here we are. Alexandra Aaron. Alexandra Aaron is our tweeter here who just points out, I think quite correctly, Milo could have spent his entire life posturing about how Simon & Schuster had not published his terrible festering sore of a book because he was, quote, dangerous and that they were PC. But instead he went and sued them, which forced them to share their actual documentation of the process of dropping the book. Now we get to the upshot here. The lawsuit has as evidence, and now being widely shared around the internet, Simon & Schuster's editor's notes about Milo's book, which individually are hilarious and essentially reveal that he submitted to them a manuscript. He may or may not have actually written it himself. So just completely full of holes and completely full of BS that they just essentially couldn't be involved in publishing it, with or without the pedophilia scandal. Some of the screen caps included in the Pinter post here says quotes from emails going back and forth about things that need to be changed. And this email is 7 main issues that must be addressed in the revised manuscript in order for them to go ahead and print this thing. For example, the chapter, Why Establishment Gays Hate Me, they say, needs a better central thesis than the notion that gay people should go back in the closet. Oh, and the feminist chapter needed a stronger argument against feminism than just saying that they're ugly and sexless and have cats. That's apparently their evaluation of what he had submitted to them, is that it's just a litany of his complaints and screaming about people that he doesn't like. And the notes, the individual notes from the editors, are actually included in these things, and they go directly to the problem with conservative publishing in general. The comments are very interesting. Unclear, unfunny, delete. Avoid gratuitous insults. You will have to address the charge of racism clearly and with greater depth. Well, when you discuss Leslie Jones in this book, and you have to do X, Y, Z. This section feels phenomenally petty. This whole section has to go. Too much ego. This entire argument is ridiculous. This entire section is the most poorly thought out section in the book. This other section doesn't make sense or pass intellectual muster. It's just trolling on an issue that many readers might take seriously. On and on and on. The comments essentially declare that there are no valid arguments being presented in this book. None. And the arguments that are presented are unfounded, even with trollery. Just plain unfounded. They just don't, you're just yelling about things you don't like in this. And now, this leads us to a larger point. These sorts of edits that they're making, they're good edits. And they tell us a little something about the publishing industry. They remind us that this is the sort of commentary that editors at serious imprints used to offer to authors all the time. And it's why we came as a society essentially to trust mainstream book publishers as offering, at least in the nonfiction genre, and modern history or societal comment, whatever, that we used to trust that these were serious entrants in the marketplace of ideas. But a lot of that got abandoned. And it's also these sorts of comments that point out, you're not making a real argument here. You're just full of crap. It's also not only what made us trust book publishing, but it's also what made conservatives abandon, largely, the mainstream book publishing world. It's what led to the creation of conservative book clubs. Let's avoid bookstores that only essentially carry books printed by reputable publishers. And it's what made them publish their own books, self-publish them, and try to sell them through conservative book clubs instead of bookstores. And then, when they found out that that really didn't make the big money, they still needed to be in bookstores. What happened was Simon & Schuster and the like, they're complicit in this too. They began creating their own off-brand imprints with different names so they didn't get the taint of publishing crap books like Yiannopoulos and, all the rest of them who they do publish, Ann Coulter and the like, and they could lay it off on some other one. This is Simon & Schuster, it's Liberty Books. And we began seeing entrants into the marketplace that weren't vetted at all, and it didn't matter because as long as they could do the equivalent in the publishing world of getting clicks, that is to say selling books, they were happy to publish them and fill the bookstores with them. It's a very serious problem. I had to address it. It has left me without time to tell you what's coming up next on Netroots Radio. But the answer, of course, is Justice Putnam and his fantastic collection of all the stories that I've missed by riffing on these other ones today. Please do stay tuned.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
with David Waldman.
They're going to be all over the place in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You're going to want to be there to pick up on all this. There is Trump Russia. There is Mar-a-Lago. There is Ari Melber's reports from MSNBC. There's more reports from the town of Whitefish in Montana and its hotbed of far-right white supremacy. You got to stay tuned and hear it all.